There was a time when purification did not come in bottles.It did not arrive in sealed capsules or measured doses.It grew quietly in dust, along pathways no one owned.Ten plants, named in texts older than empires, consumed not as supplements but as survival. They did not cleanse in the way the modern world defines cleansing. They sustained, they restored. They carried the body through famine, infection, and long seasons of uncertainty. And then, slowly, they disappeared from daily life, not because they failed, but because they could not be packaged. Could not be controlled, could not be owned. Before we go further, understand what this is. This is not a list. This is a record. If knowledge like this matters to you, if you believe something vital has been set aside rather than lost, subscribe to Seed Time Botanics. Not for growth, for preservation, because what cannot be stored in systems survives only in memory. And memory requires witnesses. Stay with us. The archive opens here. In the oldest texts, written in languages shaped by land and season, plants are not described as remedies. They are described as provisions. Given. Placed. Expected to be used. Hyssop. A small, unassuming plant, growing from stone walls in arid climates. It appears in purification rituals not as symbol, but as function. Its leaves carry volatile compounds, thymol, carvacrol, known now to disrupt microbial membranes. But the people who used it did not speak of compounds. They spoke of cleansing. They soaked it in water. They applied it to wounds. They understood what it did, long before they understood how. Bitter herbs, consumed during times of transition, not chosen for taste, chosen for effect. Compounds that stimulate bile flow, that support liver function, that assist the body in processing what must be removed. Garlic. Reference not as medicine, but as necessity. A plant so potent that entire cultures depended on it during disease outbreaks. Modern analysis would later identify allicin, a compound with broad antimicrobial properties. But in the ancient world, garlic was not studied. It was trusted. Olive. Not only oil for light, but oil for the body, rich in oleic acid and polyphenols, compounds that reduce inflammation and support vascular health. They did not measure inflammation. They observed endurance. Fig. Leaf and fruit both used latex from the leaf applied to skin, fruit consumed for digestion, loaded with fiber, enzymes, micronutrients that regulate internal balance. These were not isolated remedies. They were systems. Each plant working alongside the others, each addressing a different pathway. Each growing in proximity to the next. The land itself functioned as a pharmacy. Not organized. Not labeled, but complete. What made these plants different was not potency. It was design. They did not require cultivation in the modern sense. They thrived in neglect. Hyssop, rooted in cracks where soil was minimal. Garlic stored itself as cloves, replicating season after season without intervention. Olive trees lived for centuries, producing without replanting. Fig trees extended roots deep into dry ground, pulling moisture where none seemed available. These plants were not seasonal luxuries. They were constants, stable across generations, resilient across climates. They required no infrastructure, no storage systems. No supply chains. Their value did not degrade over time. It increased, because once established, they did not need to be replaced. In a world without refrigeration, without chemical preservation, without centralized systems, this mattered. Survival depended not on abundance, but on reliability, and these plants were reliable. There are records, scattered, fragmented, but present. In 701 BCE, during the Assyrian siege of Jerusalem, access to external resources was cut. Water systems were compromised. Disease spread in confined populations. And yet, Accounts describe the continued use of local plant systems. Garlic. Bitter herbs. Infusions prepared under conditions. Where no formal medicine existed. In the Roman period, soldiers carried garlic and dried herbs as part of their rations. Not for flavor, for preservation of health in environments where infection was constant. During medieval outbreaks, including the early waves of plague in the 14th century, communities that maintained traditional plant use garlic, onion, wild herbs showed patterns of resistance not fully understood at the time. These are not controlled studies. They are observations, but they repeat across geography, across time. The same plants. The same outcomes. And then, gradually, the records thin, not abruptly, but consistently. The disappearance did not happen through removal. It happened through replacement. As systems shifted toward centralization, uniformity became necessary. Plants that varied in potency, that grew differently depending on soil and climate, that could not be standardized, became inconvenient. Medicine moved toward compounds that could be isolated. Measured. Reproduced. Stored. Agriculture shifted toward crops that could be scaled. Transported. Sold in volume. These plants did not fit. They were too adaptable. Too local. Too independent. They did not require purchase. They did not require infrastructure. They existed outside the emerging systems of ownership. And so they were not included, not banned, not erased. Simply not taught. And what is not taught does not transfer. What does not transfer fades. In the last century, something quiet began to happen. Not a rediscovery, a confirmation. Laboratories began isolating compounds from plants, long considered ordinary. Garlic. Studied extensively. Its antimicrobial properties documented against bacteria, viruses, fungi. Hyssop. Analyzed for its volatile oils and their effect on respiratory pathogens. Olive leaf extract, shown to contain oleuropein, a compound with antiviral and anti-inflammatory properties. Bitter herbs, re-examined for their role in liver function and detoxification pathways. What ancient systems described as cleansing, modern science began to describe in precise language. Not contradiction. Translation. The knowledge had not been wrong. It had been waiting, but something else had changed. Memory. In many cultures, these plants became associated with hardship. Garlic. The food of laborers. Of survival during scarcity. Bitter herbs, consumed during periods of constraint, not abundance. They carried the imprint of difficult times, and as societies moved toward abundance, or the appearance of it, these foods were left behind, not because they lacked value, because they reminded people of when they had no choice. Generations grew without them, not through prohibition. Through preference, and preference is shaped by memory. Now the systems that replace them show strain. Soil depletion, nutrient decline, supply chain fragility, chronic illness rising in patterns not seen before. The modern world produces more. But sustains less, and in this environment, the old plants begin to return, not as relics. As solutions already adapted to instability. Garlic grows in small spaces, requires little, stores itself. Olive trees endure drought, produce for generations. Hyssop thrives where soil is thin. Bitter herbs regenerate quickly, require no intervention. They do not need to be redesigned. They were designed for this. There are 10 plants most often referenced across the oldest texts, not grouped together intentionally, but appearing again and again. Hyssop. Garlic. Onion. Leek. Coriander. Mint. Cumin. Fig. Olive. And bitter herbs as a category. Wild greens with sharp compounds. Each one interacts with the body differently. Supporting systems that modern language separates. circulation.digestion.immune response. But in practice, they were never separated. They were consumed together. Integrated. A system within a system. If you are still here, you understand what this is. This is not about returning to the past. It is about recognizing what never stopped working. If this record matters, subscribe to Seed Time Botanics, because what survives in fragments requires reconstruction. And reconstruction requires attention. The phrase "purify your blood" does not appear in scientific literature. But the processes it describes do. Reduction of oxidative stress. Support of liver detoxification pathways. Improvement of circulation. Antimicrobial activity within the body. These are measurable. Documented. But separated. Analyzed individually. The ancient systems did not separate them. They address the body as a whole, and the plants reflect that. They do not target. They support. Quietly. Consistently. Over time. There is a tendency to look for singular solutions. One plant, one compound, one answer. But the systems that endured were not singular. They were layered. Redundant. If one plant failed, another compensated. If one season was harsh, another plant thrived. Diversity was not aesthetic. It was functional. And these 10 plants represent that. Diversity. Not identical. Complementary. Today, these plants exist. Still. In gardens. In neglected land. In regions where modern systems have not fully replaced older ones. They grow without recognition. Without marketing. Without demand. Because they do not need demand. They need only space. And time. The knowledge was never lost. It was set aside, stored in practices that were no longer passed on, but the plants did not disappear. They remained, waiting in soil that remembers, seeds that remain viable. Roots that extend deeper than the failed systems built above them. If there is something to take from this, it is not urgency. It is patience. These plants do not operate on the timelines of modern systems. They do not respond instantly. They do not produce on command. They grow. They establish. They sustain. Given time. Subscribe to Seed Time. Botanics. Not as an action. As a decision to remember. Because the systems that replace this knowledge depend on forgetting. And the simplest way to resist forgetting is to keep watching. To keep listening. To keep the archive open. The soil has not changed its mind. Plants have not withdrawn their function. Time continues. Quietly. Inevitably. And what was once dismissed as primitive waits. Not for permission, but for recognition.